And we are back. We've got in studio right now Trey Chappelle with College Crossing. A lot of information that he's going to be able to give you guys about building a list of colleges, what you're pursuing after you're done with high school, as well as writing those essays that are very important for getting accepted into those colleges. Now, before we get into the presentation, Trey, do you want to give us a little bit of background on College Crossing?
Sure. Yeah, I started the company back in 2002, kind of grew up in the area, and saw a need to kind of reach out and help some students individually one-on-one and place them all over the country and some internationally at different colleges.
Okay, awesome. Now, as far as the other stuff that you do, this isn't an exhaustive list of the services that you can provide for potential students.
Right.
What are some of the other things outside of building the list of colleges and then making sure that you're getting the best essays written? What other stuff can you help bring to students?
Yeah, I mean, those are two of the main ones, but kind of a timeline for students is key, keeping them on track and on task, really looking at college application deadlines and what all those mean and how they work together and how to be competitive too on paper. Everything you submit on paper is going to go in and get graded.
Yep.
And it's important to be competitive and kind of be strategic about it. So we work with students on that.
Awesome. Now, for a lot of our younger students who are out there turning in, who are maybe freshmen, sophomores, should they be doing this stuff now as a sophomore, looking a couple years down the road at what colleges they might want to attend, or should they be waiting, junior year, senior year? When should they be starting this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think it's ever really too early. You don't want to get burned down on it too quickly, though. So I tell freshmen and sophomores, just whenever you're traveling in-state, out-of-state, anywhere, just kind of cruise through a college campus, see what you like. If it's big, if it's small, just kind of take note of it and soak it in so that later on when you're trying to figure out, if I'm going to college and I want to build a list of colleges, I remember seeing this one that we drove through. So that's what they can do early on, but when they start to put together the pieces of the application, that's mostly junior year and leading into senior year. You certainly don't want to wait until senior year for all this stuff.
Okay, awesome. So we will go ahead and get started with the presentation. Now, again, students, remember, if you have questions, Trey's going to give us a lot of information right now. If you have questions while the presentation's going on, please get those in to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, any of the social media platforms. That way we can relay them right live to Trey as soon as he's done with the presentation, and we can go straight into the Q&A session afterwards. But again, remember, direct messages on Facebook, comment on the Instagram photos that we've got up, send us direct messages through Twitter, go ahead and send us some snaps. Our social media coordinator, Nicole, is going to be all over that stuff throughout the rest of the day. So without further ado, we'll go straight into the presentation.
Perfect. So Ron wanted me to kind of paint the picture of two different things, and that's building a list of colleges and then also writing the college essays. And I'm going to give you an overview of both of these sides of the process. And they're pretty important, but I'm going to try to make it so it can apply to any school out there. First of all, what does it mean to build a balanced list of colleges? And what we're going to do is start with the search process. And so we talked just a minute ago about going out on the road and seeing different things. But in terms of how to put the search together, one more slide there, we want to consider a few things. Parents and students always come into our office and they go, oh my gosh, where do I start? There's 3,000 or 4,000 four-year schools out there and a bunch of two-year schools as well. Where do I start with this? First of all, you want to think about the size. So wherever you've been in life, or you've lived in a city or lived in an urban area, a rural setting, you want to try to figure out where am I going to be comfortable. So the size of the school is going to matter. If you're used to fewer people around in life and we send you to a really, really big school, it could be a shock and uncomfortable. And same with the other way around. So consider, am I going to look at a small to medium school, or am I going to look at medium to larger schools? Second is consider the region. So if you can kind of picture the map of the country, cut it into 4 slices. Look at the West, look at the Midwest, look at the Deep South, and look at the East. And try to ask yourself which 2 of those regions would you consider going to college in? And then to be fair, cross off one region. Just totally eliminate it. Consider the selectivity. So if you look at your grades, if you look at test scores, you look at kind of how competitive you are as an applicant, you want to try to figure out, are we looking at schools that admit 10% of their applicant pool? Am I competitive? Am I that competitive? Or are we looking at schools that accept 80 or 90% of their applicants to just kind of give you choices and the ability to get into those schools? And the last thing is obviously cost and scholarships. So college has the reputation of being extremely expensive, but there's ways to offset that. So as you're building your list and you're going through that search, try to figure out which schools are giving out good scholarships. Just read online. There's a lot of student comments, a lot of parent comments about the schools that are doing the best job at this. and look at the starting cost as well. When you look at setting up a list of schools, what we try to recommend doing for each student is putting it in a balanced list of 3 groups. So you have your most selective, your more selective, and then your moderately selective. So the most selective schools are reach schools. Don't be afraid to go after some really good schools, even if you think your grades, your test scores might not quite be there. It's okay to reach for a couple of these. These are schools that might admit less than 25% of their applicants. That middle group, more selective, I'd recommend having 2 or 3 or 4 schools in this group that you want to apply to once you get ready for college. And these are schools that admit between 25 and 75% of their applicant pool. And then finally, that selective group. These are still good schools, but they're schools that you have a higher chance of getting into. They're probably going to admit more than 75% of their applicants. So if you have 1 or 2 in the top group, 3 or 4 in the middle group, and 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 in that bottom tier, that'd be a good starting place to build your list. And then in-state as well. So tips on how to knock down that list of colleges. Sometimes when we build a list of colleges with students, we start with 20 schools. And at the end of things, we don't want to apply to 20 schools. We want to apply to 5, 6, 7, or 8 schools. So how to refine that and how to knock that list down. First of all, research online. Cruise through student comments again, look at statistics, look at campus photos too. Plan a visit to campus. Again, if you're cruising around the West Coast, California, or the East Coast, New York, or Boston, or DC, weave your way through campus. See what it's like. See what characteristics you like the most, what matters most to you. And then go back to your list, and maybe you saw something in Washington, D.C. that was too urban. Go back and cross off the other urban schools on your list. Consider strengths in both your second and your first choice majors. So a lot of you guys out there that are in high school have a major that you might want to pursue in college. But about 80% of students out there change majors once they get to school. So kind of think ahead and go, if I'm going to pick this college ultimately, and it's going to be on my list, let's find 1 or 2 or 2 or 3 majors that I really like. At the end of the day, let's try applying to 5 to 10 schools in that balanced list. Include that in-state option, balance that list, and give yourself some choices. Don't make that top category, those most selective colleges, too difficult. And then lay out your list visually. So online, we're going to have on this next slide an example. It's a little scattered there. Sorry about the formatting, but what you can do is you can put your toughest schools at the top and then include some criteria like their acceptance rate, their population, their location, and then the cost. Next topic we want to talk about is the college essay. Are there any comments or questions so far? You want me to keep going?
We'll do all the comments and questions towards the end.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the college essay next. There are a lot of college essays out there, but there's one main college essay. So we'll kind of go by that title right now. When you start thinking about what to write in the college essay, this is your voice. So you got to imagine yourself in front of the admissions reader and what you're going to say to them about your personality that's going to kind of stick with them and get you in. So the brainstorm. Brainstorming takes a couple of people. You can't just sit down and do it by yourself. But what you might want to do in the brainstorm is sit down with a couple of buddies, a couple of friends, or even family members, and try to ask some questions about yourself and have them ask you, what are you passionate about? What do you love doing? We've had students come in and talk about wakeboarding and write an entire essay on wakeboarding. We've had students write about race car driving and drifting. We've had students talk about going to Europe with their family over the summer. There's lots of stuff out there you guys can talk about. How would your friends describe you? That's a great question. So what would your friends say about who you are and what defines you? What are those characteristics or qualities? Those are the qualities you guys want to put in your college essays too. How do you stand out from your classmates or your peers? So if you have friends that might apply to that same school and you're all talking about community service, you're all talking about being a doctor one day, you want to start to separate yourself and figure out what makes you different from them. Maybe it's a family tradition, maybe it's something you did when you were 16 years old that really changed your life. And then finally, what's your top 10 list? So there's a school in North Carolina, Wake Forest, that asked for a student's top 10 list. And these are 10 one-word answers. If you sit down and brainstorm with your friends or your family about your top 10 list, you guys can come up with 10 things that you really like in life and consider writing about one of them in your essay. Then you got to go draft. So this is the part of the essay which takes some writing and takes some time. So you got to sit down and draft your story. Don't worry about grammar or punctuation. Just go after it. Just write that story as much as you can. One thing I would recommend is keeping it under 2 pages. as daunting as these college applications can be, they're not that long. These essays aren't that long. They're under 2 pages, so try to keep it short. Focus on telling your story. Tell the story on paper like you would in person. Make it visual. So these readers, they read thousands of these late at night. They're going to forget a lot of them. They're going to get bored. So if you can keep it visual and walk them through your story and give them highlights about what they could see on paper, that'd be best. Make it memorable. Sometimes they'll read something and 2 weeks later they have to go decide if you're in or out at that college. So if you make it about something that they can walk away and remember and stand up at that table and fight for your position 2 weeks later, that's a good story to talk about. I'll give you a quick example. We have a couple on the screen here, but let's talk about the first one real quick. We had a student a couple of years ago that lived in downtown Phoenix. She was the only student at school to ride her bike to school every day. Her college essay had a paragraph for each of the stoplights she had to stop at on 7th Street on her way to school that day. She talked to 3 different people at those 3 different stoplights. They're all different people from different walks of life. That college essay told us how she interacted with people and who she really was deep inside. So it was a great story. Then once you draft your essay, you need to revise it. It's got to be as close to perfect as possible. These are important pieces of writing. So have someone else review your essay. Have them look at the story first. Does that story make sense? Then after they get through the story, start to look for grammar. Make sure that story is making sense to other people as well. So not just one person, but multiple people.
All right, so we'll get into the questions here in just a moment. Now, again, up on the screen, all of you guys can see the website that is available for College Crossing. If you guys have any further questions that you might not be able to think of right now, but you're going through the presentation and something pops into your head when you're laying down for bed tonight and you're like, oh crap, I should have asked that, go ahead, go on College Crossing and make sure you can get that question in. There's not going to be a way that we don't get it to them or that you can't get that question answered. We want you guys to have the most information possible for the next step you're going to take into college. So without further ado, we will get to some questions. And we've had a couple come in. So let's go to the first one, and you kind of already answered it, but the first question that we'd had submitted to us was, how many schools should I be considering as a high school student? I mean, you talked about the list being 20 long for some students, and you mentioned getting it down to 5 to 10. Do some students just hone in on 1 or 2 and that's plenty for them? Do you see a lot of students who try and apply to 10 different schools and see what sticks? I mean, what's the perfect number, I guess, that students are looking for?
So the low number, Ron, that we see is like 3 or 4. So if you are really ready to go to college at some point and you want to start these college applications, I would try at least 3. On the high end, we've seen students do 30. That's way too much. It's a ton of time. It's a lot of money to apply to that many schools, and it's just kind of a dartboard toss that you're trying there. So I think ideal trying to go back to that 5 to 10 range is perfect. Okay.
So again, guys, if you've got a couple schools or you see 2 or 3 here that you absolutely love, definitely don't be afraid to add a few more to that list. So for the students that are out there asking, what's the perfect number for me? It might be 5 for some of you, it might be 10 for some of you, but usually best to keep it somewhere in that 5 to 10 range, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Now, the next question, you talked about using these essays as a way to highlight yourself. What are some steps that our high school students now can start doing so that they highlight certain aspects that might be beneficial to them in the essay process? What are some things that they can do now as high school students to start building that foundation, like volunteering, joining clubs? Is there a base that they should be setting up for themselves for the future?
Yeah. So good points there too. We used to just have students write it down, keep it on an online resume, but there's 2 really cool sites you guys can look at. There's one called Zeemee, ZEEMEE.com. It's an online free creative resume. It's visual, you can add video, you can add pictures, and then descriptions of all your activities. And it keeps track on your student profile there throughout the years. So you can start with Zeemee, and you can start with the Coalition application. The Coalition app is a new application that's going to go to a bunch of schools in the future, and they're letting students as early as the age of 14 or 15 jump on this and start to keep their activities in one spot. When you look at trying to get those activities or grab those activities for a story later on, you want to try to find 2 or 3 things while you're in high school that you can get involved in. They're all a little different from each other. So maybe it's a little bit of community service, maybe it's a summer internship or a job, Maybe it's an immersion trip abroad. It can be any of those. Just, we've worked with students who are basketball players and everything is basketball.
Yeah.
That doesn't help us out a ton at the end of the game.
Yeah. Okay. So again, key point: make sure you guys differentiate some of the things that you're putting on your college application, so it's not all one thing and you don't come across as too one-dimensional. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. The next question that we had was, can a well-written essay, so for students who might have a lack of the extracurricular activities, can a well-written essay that sort of highlights them make up for that, the lack of extracurriculars?
Yeah, certainly. So if you leave that admissions reader with an image of how something really turned you around or really got you to mature in high school or really meant something to your personality, it can't overshadow horrendous grades.
Yeah.
But if it's a tougher school and you have moderate grades, it could certainly shift their opinion and grab their attention. So there's a lot of other stuff you can do to kind of influence their decision by contacting them and sending them emails and seeing them on campus. But that essay is really a big attention grabber for sure.
So would you say that the essay that you're writing is sort of that foot in the door, like if you were going for a job interview, like this is the way I ensure that I at least get seen, as opposed to just tossed in the pile with all the rest of similar resumes?
Yeah, exactly. Because so many students apply to college and they send in test scores and they send in their transcripts, which has their GPA on it, right? And that's kind of it, so it's numbers. So remember we talked about personality in the essay? That's the way to stand out. If it's personable, that can really push your application forward.
Okay. And we had one more question come through. As far as the essays go, that's the place that you want to showcase your sort of innovation, right? It seems like everything's sort of trending towards being as innovative as possible in college nowadays. Like you said, it won't necessarily make up for if you have a really, really big struggle with your grades and you're not really showing what you need to show. All the innovation in the world might not bring that up, but if you're a good student with that innovative piece in your essay, do you think that will go a longer way to showcasing you, as opposed to a student who might have slightly better grades but just does the standard transcript and list of your grades and all that stuff?
Yeah, because college is not an end stop for you guys. It's a place for them to continue to develop you and get you launched into the real world or grad school afterwards. So they don't want a student who's got it all figured out before then. If a student's coming in innovative and kind of has this questioning mind, investigative mind, that's a great thing. We have a guy right now we're working with who is always thinking about new things, and he's always researching new technologies and innovations throughout the world. And we have to slow him down sometimes because he never has enough time to stop and really thoroughly dig into it. He just keeps moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
So as long as you guys out there have some stuff that you like, it might not be part of your curriculum or part of what your mom or dad wants you to look at, but it's just kind of a cool technology or cool innovation out there. Dig into it, research, check it out, get involved, and that might turn into a great essay.
All right. Perfect. Well, Trey, again, with College Crossing, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah.
And again, guys, understand too, these are not just the two things that Trey can help you with. So if you have other questions, definitely go to the website, check that out, ask those questions through the website, because there are other things that Trey's going to be able to help you out with. So again, if you have further questions, check out the website. You can ask them again to us here, and we can relay them to Trey at a later time. But Trey, thank you very much for being here. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys in about 10 minutes. We've got the next two presentations coming up. The Primavera Financial Aid presentation that'll be geared towards showing you guys some information about FAFSA and some grants that you could possibly pursue as you go to college, followed by Northern Arizona University going on. So stay tuned. In about 10 minutes, we'll be going on with that Primavera presentation. We look forward to seeing you.